Millions of individuals within the United States might soon find themselves compelled to gather their belongings and depart, irrespective of their personal desires. But what is driving this potential exodus? What transformations are occurring so rapidly that entire communities could potentially vanish? New immigration regulations are making the prospect of legally remaining in America more challenging than ever before. The situation is evolving swiftly, almost overnight, encompassing everything from abrupt deportations to policies specifically targeting whole demographic groups. Families that have established lives here over many years could face removal tomorrow. Even individuals possessing legal safeguards are not entirely secure. Could you be impacted? Is the character of your city on the verge of permanent alteration? Stay tuned, because the next regulation implemented might strike closer to home than you anticipate. The world stage is currently witnessing a multitude of significant events, from geopolitical shifts to economic fluctuations. Amidst this global turbulence, substantial changes are unfolding within the borders of the United States, specifically concerning its immigration policies. These shifts are poised to affect millions, reshaping communities and altering the very fabric of American society. We understand that navigating these complex issues can be overwhelming, which is why our channel is dedicated to providing clear, concise, and factual analysis of the policies that could impact you, your family, or your community. We delve deep into the nuances of these new rules, examining their potential consequences and bringing you the information you need to stay informed. Before we proceed, if you find value in understanding these critical developments, please consider subscribing to our channel and hitting the like button. Your support is crucial for helping us continue to produce this content and reach a wider audience. Also, let us know where you're watching from in the comments below. It's always insightful to see how far our community reaches. We will draw conclusions from these developments at the end of the video, so be sure to watch until the very end. Something monumental has just shifted in the United States immigration system, and if you are an immigrant residing in the U.S., this is information you absolutely need to be aware of. Imagine waking up one morning to discover that, effective immediately, you are required to prove your legal right to remain in the country at all times. No justifications, no special considerations. Does this sound severe? Well, it's becoming a reality. The mandatory migrant registration rule is now in effect, mandating that all non-citizens register with the federal government. This involves providing biometric data, such as fingerprints and photographs, always carrying proof of this registration, and periodically reporting to immigration offices. The implications are significant. Failure to adhere to these requirements could result in immediate detention. This isn't solely about undocumented individuals either. Even those holding work permits or awaiting decisions on asylum applications could encounter substantial obstacles. Could this represent the initial phase towards large-scale deportations? Consider the scenario. What occurs if someone inadvertently leaves their registration documents at home? With over 46 million immigrants currently living in the U.S., this single rule possesses the power to disrupt entire communities practically overnight, creating an atmosphere of uncertainty and fear among vast populations who have built their lives in America. The requirement for constant proof of status places an immense burden on individuals, transforming everyday activities into potentially high-stakes encounters with authorities. The collection of biometric data raises privacy concerns, adding another layer of complexity to the lives of non-citizens. The mandate for regular reporting to immigration offices could disrupt work schedules, family life, and access to essential services, further destabilizing communities. The potential for immediate detention due to non-compliance, even accidental, hangs like a shadow over millions, fostering anxiety and potentially discouraging participation in civic life. This rule fundamentally alters the relationship between non-citizens and the state, shifting towards a more surveilled and controlled environment. It's crucial for everyone, citizens and non-citizens alike, to understand the far-reaching effects of this policy. Stay informed, as the landscape continues to change rapidly. Please remember to watch this video through to the end, as we'll be summarizing these points and offering our conclusions on these significant policy changes. You might assume that the justice system demands solid evidence before an individual is arrested or deported. However, under a newly implemented rule concerning alleged gang members, this assumption no longer holds true. Guess what? You don't need a criminal conviction to be expelled from the country. The enhanced deportation of alleged gang members policy is now fully operational, and it's significantly altering the dynamics of immigration enforcement. Authorities possess the power to deport anyone merely suspected of gang affiliation, even if that person has never committed a crime. The threshold for action has been lowered dramatically. Mere suspicion can be enough to trigger removal proceedings. Some individuals targeted under this policy are reportedly being held in detention facilities like Guantanamo Bay before being shipped off to countries they haven't seen in years, places where they may have no remaining ties or support systems. This raises serious questions about due process and the presumption of innocence. Think this policy only affects criminals? Reconsider. If you've ever been in the wrong place at the wrong time, or even if a simple misunderstanding occurs, you could find yourself caught in this enforcement net. With over 10,000 deportations based on alleged gang affiliation already reported, this crackdown extends far beyond actual gang members. It's impacting entire neighborhoods, creating a climate of fear where association or appearance can lead to devastating consequences. What happens to families torn apart by deportation based on unproven allegations? The reliance on suspicion rather than conviction opens the door to potential errors, profiling, and the targeting of individuals based on flimsy evidence or community rumors. The use of facilities like Guantanamo Bay for immigration detention further blurs the lines between criminal justice and immigration enforcement, raising significant human rights concerns. The long-term impact on communities, where residents may fear interacting with law enforcement or participating in community activities, could be profound. This policy shift demands scrutiny, questioning whether security concerns justify bypassing fundamental legal protections and potentially deporting innocent individuals alongside actual threats. Imagine residing in the United States for years, meticulously building a life, raising a family, and adhering to all the rules, only to awaken one morning and discover that your legal right to be here has vanished. No advance warning, no plan for transition, just a ticking clock counting down until you are forced to leave. Sounds like a terrifying ordeal, doesn't it? Well, for approximately 300,000 Venezuelans, this nightmare has just become stark reality. The termination of temporary protected status, or TPS, for Venezuelan nationals is now officially in effect. This designation, TPS, was initially granted because the U.S. government recognized the dire situation in Venezuela, a country gripped by complete economic and political collapse. Venezuelans didn't just choose to leave their homeland. They were forced to flee, seeking refuge from chaos and instability. The U.S. acknowledged this humanitarian crisis, offering TPS as a form of relief, allowing them to live and work legally in the States. This status provided a crucial lifeline, enabling hundreds of thousands to establish roots, find employment, pay taxes, and contribute significantly to the American economy and their local communities. Many have American-born children, own homes, and have started businesses, becoming integral parts of the social fabric. But now, that essential protection has been abruptly revoked. Deportations are already underway. There are no extensions, no avenues for appeal, just the cold, hard reality. Leave the country voluntarily, or risk being forcibly removed. This sudden policy reversal throws lives into turmoil. Think about the gravity of this situation. A government decision strips legal protection from a specific group, many of whom fled life-threatening conditions. Could this establish a dangerous precedent for other TPS recipients, such as those from nations like Haiti or El Salvador, who also rely on this status for safety and stability? With thousands now desperately scrambling for alternative options, this transcends being merely an immigration issue. It's a humanitarian crisis unfolding in real time within the U.S. The abruptness of the termination leaves little time for individuals and families to prepare, potentially leading to job loss, homelessness, and the separation of families, particularly those with U.S. citizen children who may be left behind or forced to move to a country they've never known. The ethical implications of sending people back to a country deemed unsafe just months or years prior are profound and warrant serious consideration. You'd naturally assume that if you're arrested within the United States, you would, at the very least, have your day in court before facing severe repercussions, right? However, guess what? Under a new policy known as the Laken Riley Act, which was signed into law on January 29, 2025, that fundamental expectation might no longer apply to everyone. This act stands as one of the most stringent immigration laws witnessed in years. It mandates the obligatory detention of undocumented immigrants accused of committing certain crimes, notably including offenses related to theft. What does this translate to in practical terms? It means no possibility of bail, no opportunities for second chances, and no consideration given to the specific circumstances surrounding the alleged offense. If you are undocumented and find yourself arrested, your fate is almost definitively sealed regarding detention pending deportation proceedings. But here's where it gets even more complex and potentially alarming. The Laken Riley Act also empowers state attorneys general to initiate lawsuits against the federal government if they perceive that immigration laws are not being enforced with sufficient rigor. This provision creates a direct pathway for states to exert pressure on federal agencies, potentially pushing for an increase in deportations and stricter enforcement measures across the board. Don't mistakenly believe this law solely targets individuals accused of serious felonies. Its scope is broad enough that someone apprehended for shoplifting or driving without a valid license could potentially be detained indefinitely and fast-tracked for deportation. Crucially, no conviction is required. Merely an accusation can trigger these severe consequences. Consider the implications. What happens when innocent individuals are mistakenly caught up in this system due to false accusations or misunderstandings? With thousands already being detained under these new, stricter rules, families are being torn apart, sometimes over relatively minor alleged offenses. The removal of judicial discretion in bail decisions and the emphasis on detention, based on accusation rather than conviction, challenge long-standing principles of the American legal system. The potential for increased state-level influence on federal immigration enforcement adds another layer of political complexity, potentially leading to inconsistent application of the law across different states and further intensifying the climate of fear within immigrant communities. What if one of the most foundational rights in America, the right to citizenship simply by virtue of being born on U.S. soil, was suddenly rescinded? It seems inconceivable, doesn't it? Yet, under the proposed end of birthright citizenship policy, this could become the reality for millions of children born in the United States to non-citizen parents. You might be astonished to learn that currently, over 4 million children born to immigrant parents in the U.S. hold birthright citizenship. This principle, enshrined in the 14th Amendment of the Constitution, has been a cornerstone of American identity for over a century. The rationale behind the push to end birthright citizenship is the argument that it incentivizes illegal immigration and promotes so-called birth tourism, where affluent foreigners allegedly travel to the U.S. specifically to give birth, thereby securing American citizenship for their child. However, is revoking this right a justifiable response, especially considering the impact on innocent children who had no influence over their parents' circumstances or decisions? And here's the truly unsettling aspect. This policy wouldn't just affect future births. Even children born in U.S. hospitals, with no ties whatsoever to any criminal activity, could face uncertain futures regarding their citizenship status if their parents are undocumented. Think about the ramifications. Hundreds of thousands of families would be forced to reevaluate every aspect of their lives: access to health care, education for their children, their ability to work and own property, and their very future in the country they call home. Could this be the initial move towards dismantling rights that have been integral to American history for more than 150 years? The legal battles surrounding any attempt to alter the 14th Amendment would be immense and protracted, challenging the very definition of citizenship. The potential creation of a multi-tiered system, where some individuals born in the U.S. are citizens and others are not, would fundamentally reshape American society and create widespread uncertainty and division. What if the process of obtaining your green card or having a visa application approved suddenly became significantly more difficult? For thousands upon thousands of immigrants, that's precisely the situation unfolding due to the stricter public charge rule. This rule represents a major shift in how immigration applications are evaluated. It grants immigration officials broader authority to deny applications for legal status based on an applicant's past, present, or potential future use of certain public benefits. This includes programs like food assistance, SNAP, housing vouchers, and specific government-funded healthcare programs. While some version of a public charge consideration has existed for many years, the Trump administration significantly expanded its scope and severity. Now, the current administration is reinforcing a stringent interpretation, focusing intensely on factors such as an applicant's income level, health status, age, and educational attainment to determine if they are likely to become reliant on government assistance. Don't be mistaken. This isn't just impacting those with extremely low incomes. Even families who utilize health programs for their children or rely temporarily on food stamps to make ends meet could find their path to permanent residency jeopardized. This stricter rule places countless families in an incredibly precarious position. Consider the data. Over 500,000 applications for legal permanent residency were denied last year under these intensified standards. It's shocking to realize how many of these rejections involved families who have been diligently working, paying taxes, and actively contributing to society. Now, many face the potential deportation or denial of the chance to remain in the only country their children may have ever known. Critics forcefully argue that this policy disproportionately targets low-income immigrants, effectively penalizing individuals who need assistance the most. Conversely, supporters maintain that it will lessen the dependency on public programs and motivate immigrants towards self-sufficiency. The central question persists. Will this rule genuinely result in fewer immigrants relying on welfare, or will it merely thrust more families into deeper hardship and fear? Is it truly equitable to make survival harder for people who are simply trying to get by? The chilling effect is already evident. Reports indicate that hospital visits and school attendance among immigrant families have declined, as people fear any interaction with public services could negatively impact their immigration status, leaving vulnerable populations without essential support. Imagine arriving in the United States after an arduous and often perilous journey, carrying the hope that your family's safety and future depend on this new beginning. You've been granted a temporary safe haven, a crucial lifeline in a world filled with uncertainty and danger. This is the essence of humanitarian parole programs. But what happens when that lifeline is abruptly severed without warning? That is precisely the scenario unfolding now due to the revocation of humanitarian parole programs. This policy change directly impacts over 200,000 refugees and asylum seekers who had previously been granted temporary relief within the U.S. through programs specifically designed to offer a chance at safety and stability. These individuals often fled life-threatening situations, war zones, political persecution, or regions devastated by natural disasters. They had already undertaken the dangerous journey, seeking sanctuary in a country that offered the promise of protection. However, the government has now effectively pulled the plug on these vital programs, leaving those who relied on them in a state of limbo, unsure of their next steps or where they might turn. These individuals now confront the terrifying prospect of being sent back to places where their lives are in immediate danger, regions rife with conflict, oppressive regimes, or environments offering no security. Why is this revocation happening? The government contends that these parole programs have been exploited by individuals who overstayed their authorized period or entered the U.S. using fraudulent claims. While this might be accurate for a subset of cases, thousands of innocent people who followed the rules, contributed to society, and sought legitimate protection are now being punished. Consider the human cost. Many refugees and asylum seekers have waited years, sometimes even decades, enduring unimaginable hardships in refugee camps or temporary settlements for their opportunity to enter the U.S. legally. Now, after enduring so much, their dreams of safety are potentially out of reach. The suspension doesn't merely affect their immediate prospects. It disrupts their entire existence, shattering hopes for rebuilding their lives. Could this indicate a larger shift away from humanitarian protections within U.S. immigration policy? Might it pave the way for even more drastic measures in the future? The policy has already contributed to increased violence and exploitation along the border, as vulnerable migrants are left with fewer safe options. The days of crossing into the United States and awaiting an asylum hearing within the country might be drawing to a close for many. The Remain in Mexico policy, officially known as the Migrant Protection Protocols, MPP, is being reinstated. This highly controversial policy, first implemented during the Trump administration, compels asylum seekers arriving at the southern border to wait in Mexico while their U.S. asylum claims are processed. This reinstatement means that individuals who would typically be allowed to stay in the U.S. pending their hearings will now be returned to Mexico. What's particularly alarming is that many of these individuals will be forced to wait in dangerous border towns, characterized by high crime rates, limited resources, and virtually no guarantees of safety. You would be shocked to discover that over 60,000 individuals are already caught in this Remain in Mexico system, and this figure is anticipated to climb as the policy continues to be enforced. Imagine being told that after fleeing your home country in fear for your life, seeking refuge and safety, you must now wait in a location that could be almost as dangerous as the one you escaped. The policy has been linked to increased violence along the border, with numerous reports detailing the kidnapping, assault, and exploitation of vulnerable migrants stranded in these hostile environments. Furthermore, many asylum seekers are denied fundamental legal protections while waiting in Mexico, making it significantly harder for them to gather evidence, consult with attorneys, and effectively present their cases once their hearing date arrives in the U.S. The critical question is whether this policy will genuinely deter illegal crossings, as its proponents claim, or if it will simply generate more chaos, suffering, and human rights abuses at the border. What does the future hold for those already trapped in this cycle for months, or even years? The final significant shift involves increased immigration enforcement in what were previously considered sensitive locations. For many years, immigration officials faced limitations on where they could conduct arrests and detentions. Places like schools, hospitals, churches, houses of worship, and even disaster relief centers were generally off-limits for enforcement actions, unless there was an immediate and clear threat to public safety. These locations were viewed as safe spaces where immigrants, regardless of their status, could access essential services without fear of apprehension. However, these rules are now being relaxed. This change grants Immigration and Customs Enforcement, IC, greater latitude to step up operations in these previously protected places, often without the former restrictions. Imagine the chilling effect. Being stopped by immigration authorities while picking up your child from school or during a necessary medical appointment. For numerous immigrant families, these sensitive locations represent the only safe environments where they can seek vital help. With this new policy in effect, these spaces are no longer guaranteed sanctuaries. This shift is generating widespread fear throughout immigrant communities. Parents are becoming hesitant to take their children to school. Individuals are avoiding crucial medical care, and the fabric of community trust is being eroded. Families are breaking apart under the strain. Consider the impact. Many families have already ceased using essential services due to the fear of being detained or deported. Hospital visits and school attendance rates among immigrant families have reportedly dropped, leaving vulnerable populations, including children and the sick, at greater risk. Proponents argue that stricter enforcement is necessary to ensure accountability for those residing in the country illegally. However, critics emphasize that it disproportionately harms innocent families and prevents them from accessing the very services they desperately need to survive and integrate. Is the potential benefit of increased enforcement worth the cost of instilling such pervasive fear and potentially denying essential aid? Will these aggressive tactics genuinely resolve the complexities of the immigration crisis, or will they inflict more harm on communities already struggling? In conclusion, the United States immigration system is undergoing a period of profound and rapid transformation. The cumulative effect of these policy changes, from mandatory registration and expedited deportations based on suspicion to the termination of protective statuses like TPS and humanitarian parole, the gutting of birthright citizenship principles, stricter public charge evaluations, the return of the Remain in Mexico policy, and increased enforcement in formerly safe locations, paints a picture of a system becoming significantly more restrictive and punitive. These rules are not abstract legal concepts. They have immediate and devastating real-world consequences for millions of individuals and families. They create an environment of pervasive fear and uncertainty, disrupt communities, strain resources, and raise fundamental questions about due process, human rights, and the very identity of America as a nation built by immigrants. While proponents argue these measures are necessary for national security and border control, the human cost is undeniable, potentially separating families, denying essential services, and returning vulnerable people to dangerous situations. The long-term impact on the economy, social cohesion, and America's standing on the global stage remains to be seen. But the immediate effect is one of widespread anxiety and instability for a significant portion of the U.S. population. Staying informed and engaging in thoughtful discussion about these complex issues is more critical now than ever. Thank you for watching. Please remember to subscribe for more analysis on critical issues. Let us know your thoughts in the comments.